Welcome to the Meta Business Podcast. The Metaverse and Web3 are bringing about the biggest revolution since the internet itself. With your hosts, Paul the Prophet Dawalibi and Jeff the Juice Cohen, we will be bringing you the latest Metaverse business news and insight into what it all means. The Meta Business Podcast starts now.
From the boardroom to the metaverse, this is the Meta Business Podcast. I am Paul Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, Jeff the Juice Cohen. For those of you who are new here, welcome to the Meta Business Podcast. What we do is we cover all the biggest metaverse stories and topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this amazing metaverse space. Jeff, how you doing this week?
I'm doing good. This is the second of 3 podcasts we're taping tonight. So it's like I get to spend the whole night. You know, that's a little inside baseball for those of you. So we tape Business of Esports prior to this. Now we got this one. Then we do the live stream after. So it's just a full Wednesday night of content. I get to spend the whole time with the Prophet. So what could be better than that?
This is episode 11. So congratulations. I will say we're almost at the point now where I can say, start telling people, hey, for our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week, because we now have enough weeks that, people have been tuning in. And if you haven't, by the way,
feedback from people, please keep it coming. We love the feedback. Tell us what you want to hear more of, what you want to hear less of. It's great when we get that. Honestly, it means a lot to me.
And definitely hit subscribe, right? Like whatever service you use to get the podcast, follow, subscribe, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, wherever you get it. Really appreciate that, because then you guys get notified right when the new episodes drop, and tell others about it. If you're working in and around the metaverse space in crypto and blockchain based gaming or something like that, definitely tell your colleagues, tell your friends, tell your family about the podcast. This is how we continue to grow this. Jeff, we have a really big story I want to kick off this week with. Hugely important story, I think, in the grand scheme of the metaverse here. And it's interesting because it's a metaverse story, it's a real estate story, and it's a celebrity story all in one, which I think is fascinating. And the headline here is, someone just paid $450,000 to be Snoop Dogg's neighbor in the metaverse. Here's how you can live by a celebrity too. So obviously a great clickbait kind of headline from Fortune magazine. But what has happened here is Snoop Dogg had bought, a piece of land in the Sandbox platform where he plans to host events. He has a virtual replica of his house, and he actually sold a parcel of land that was next to his, next to his place, next to the land that he has built on and that he owns. And what it's saying is that in this article, which I thought was interesting, in January alone, sales of metaverse real estate topped $85 million. And that between 2022 and 2028, the metaverse real estate market is expected to see a compound annual growth rate of 31%, which
I would love to see the assumptions behind it. I mean, I'm as big a fan of that as anyone of these, prognostications and top-down analysis. But please, someone send me that report. I would just love to see how they came up with that number, because if you're telling me you can predict anything that what's going to happen with any true reality about 2028 and the metaverse. I mean, we don't even know what's going to happen 3 months from now in the metaverse. This landscape is changing and shifting so much daily. In 2028, just feels like forever.
I love that you're not attacking the number; you're attacking the prediction just at its face, right? Regardless of what the numbers.
The fact that it was 85 million in January shows that there's something here. This isn't some pie in the sky, fantasy that we're talking about. People are putting real money into this. But to try to extrapolate it out, that part, anyone's guess is as good as anyone else's.
I mean, that I don't know what the predictions are for the broader, in real life real estate market. My guess is that real estate in this same period is not going to grow at compounded annual growth rate of 31%. So
maybe
there's
New York City.
maybe, but there's an underlying statement in here which says metaverse real estate will grow in value faster than traditional real estate. And I'm curious if you at least buy that, or even
I do,
that
but I'm
you're not
curious to
prepared.
hear your take. Do you think we're going to see some sort of massive, like right now it's a gold rush, right? Like, the fact that we're reading this article in and of itself, there is clearly a rush to buy land in these various different metaverses. Do we see some sort of crash? Same way we saw with crypto. I mean, we've had multiple crypto winters. Like, do we see in the next 2-3 years a lot of this land go to zero before maybe it shoots back up and other land maybe takes the place of land that isn't actually utilized?
It's a good question. I mean, this is a much bigger discussion in general. Like tech, there's this classic, saying in tech, you have the innovators come first, then the imitators, and then the idiots. The question is, with metaverse real estate, are we still in the innovators sort of portion of this? Are we in the imitators portion of this? It still feels early, right? So I still think there's a lot of potential here. I buy the 31% number. You're right. Like, I don't know. I'd love to see the assumptions behind it and how they've modeled this out. I at least buy the general principle that virtual real estate is going to seems to be will grow in value faster than traditional real estate. I always question the scarcity issue here, right? But the Snoop Dogg thing adds that sort of extra wrinkle, right? Because while Sandbox could go and create more land, or any platform could really, if they wanted to, many of them choose not to, they set a limit, but many of them could break that at some point and go make more land, right? Go create new land. There's still only a certain number of spots next to Snoop Dogg, right?
Yeah.
So do celebrity purchases become some of the draw here and drive some of the real scarcity because only 12 people can have plots next to Snoop Dogg's or whatever the number is?
Well, I mean, the name of the game in real estate is always location, location, location. So
True.
I do buy that. I do buy that a little bit. One thing I'm always interested to see when we hear about people buying plots of land in the metaverse is sort of like what they're going to do with them. Are they going to be just a landowner that's going to then rent it out? Are they going to build a game or an experience on there? I'm only bullish if you're going to build something that people actually care about, right? Like if you're just going to buy this land and think that it's cool to own, it's going to have value because Snoop Dogg has some digital thing next. Like odds are 2 years from now, nobody's probably going to care at all about Snoop Dogg's digital whatever Snoopverse that's happening.
Well, maybe
like,
we don't know.
A lot of these headlines are very like these are the kinds of things you get early in the mania, where then it becomes more interesting a couple of years from now. Okay, what's practical? Like, is the Snoopverse really? If we get to this, utopian vision of capital T, capital M, the metaverse, like, is Snoopverse really going to be a big part of it? To me, I doubt it. Right? Like, it's a cool attraction. It garners eyeballs, but like, you can't tell me that a big part of the metaverse in the future is going to be Snoop Dogg's house.
Well, I mean, even if we assume that it is, right? There's an interesting business and real estate question here, and I come back to your location argument, right? Because if you live in a very wealthy city, right, or you decide to buy a house next to Snoop Dogg in Beverly Hills, I don't know if Snoop Dogg has a home in Beverly Hills, right? But if I'm buying a home next to Snoop Dogg in Beverly Hills, I would think part of the draw there is, well, there's a chance that when I, go for a jog in the morning, I'll bump into Snoop Dogg and, maybe we'll become friends and maybe he'll invite me to his parties or, I don't know if you get the same equivalent, right, in a digital or virtual world, because even if he's having a party on his plot of land, owning the plot next to his doesn't grant you any kind of automatic access, right? Like, right. So even if you buy that Snoopverse is the big draw, will be a huge thing, will be a big part of the metaverse entertainment ecosystem, right? Having the plot of land next to that in a in a digital construct where distance really loses all meaning also, right? It takes no extra time to go to Snoopverse from a plot of land much further away than one right next to it.
Well, that's one of the big problems with metaverse real estate, where it's like there is no cost to travel, right? So it's to your exact point. Does it matter? And I think this is, I'm sorry to steal the words out of your mouth. This is what you're getting at. Does it matter that you're next to Snoop Dogg if you can just enter the metaverse right into Snoop Dogg's land? You don't have to like drive there or pay money to travel there. Yeah. So I think that's a big question mark in terms of do these plots of land hold their value longer term? And that's why I keep coming back to like, what do you build on your individual land is the most important thing. Because if people want to go there, then it has a chance to have value. I don't think you can count on the things around your land kind of giving you value.
But there may be a bigger takeaway here, Jeff, and please feel free to disagree. When esports were very early, right, a lot of the thinking, and maybe still even to this day to a certain extent, everyone took a construct and a context that they know and understand, traditional sports, right? And you try and overlay it on this new thing so that you can sort of grasp the new thing and make it understandable for people. And the reality is that has always been a mistake, right? Like trying to make esports like traditional sports has always pretty much consistently ended in failure. Because the reality is a lot of the constructs that apply to the physical world don't apply to the digital world. And I'm seeing similar kind of mistakes happen in the metaverse where people just make assumptions because our brains are wired to appreciate patterns, right? They make assumptions that, wow, the plot in Sandbox next to Snoop Dogg, that's a great investment because it's next to Snoop Dogg, without thinking through, wait a second, like the plot 10 plots over from Snoop Dogg doesn't really have any has fewer benefits than the one right next to it, because no one really stops to go, wait a second, what are the actual differences in real benefits here? So I think I worry that a lot of this rides hype built on taking things without the proper context.
So I think you're absolutely right. And I would go as far as to say that I think I agree with that even more. Like, I think real sports are more analogous to esports than virtual land is to digital land. So
that's an interesting take in and of itself. That you're saying we're even further off the mark here.
Yes, exactly.
That's actually a great segue, I think, into the second story, because this is one of those like interesting flip-flop kind of situations. And I would love to hear your take on this, Jeff. And the headline here, this is from Protocol. The headline here is EA CEO said NFTs were the future of the industry. Now he's not so sure. So EA's CEO Andrew Wilson appeared to back away from crypto in an earnings call this week. Basically, what he said was the company was currently driving on when it comes to crypto and blockchain. But 3 months ago, he had called NFTs in the broader blockchain gaming market the future of our industry. So now he says, I believe that collectability will continue to be an important part of our industry and the games and experiences that we offer our players, whether that's as part of the NFT blockchain, well, that remains to be seen. I think the way we think about it is we want to deliver the best possible player experience we can. And so we're going to evaluate that over time. But right now, it's not something we're driving hard on. So right now, we're not driving hard on it. But 3 months ago, he said, it's the future of our industry. Could you explain to me this radical change in philosophy and thinking and focus as a business?
It's funny because this is almost our third episode. So I think we literally may have covered, our 12th episode. So we may have literally covered Andrew Wilson's comments, the first earnings call 3 months ago. And we've sort of seen this shift take place. I mean, I remember when we were first talking about when Ubisoft introduced NFTs and the Quartz platform to Ghost Recon, we were pretty bullish at first, and I think my initial take was I was happy that they were putting that mechanic into a game that already had a player base, because I thought it would be easier to do that with a game that already had a player base than to build a whole new game, new IP with the mechanic. And it turned out it only took us about a week to realize that that was probably the wrong take. because there's this rife right now, where not even hardcore, I would say the general gamer is not that interested in Web3 crypto gaming right now. It is a different customer base. So I think what you're seeing here is Andrew Wilson and EA recognizing that. And I have to give them a modicum of credit for recognizing their customer base and sort of listening to what they are saying currently. Having said that, the massive caveat is this is why you don't see big companies innovate very often. It's hard to do to disrupt yourself, right? Because most of your customers are currently happy with the service you're giving them right now. They don't want this new thing. But I genuinely think he's wrong. I think his first quote was correct, that NFT and blockchain gaming probably does represent the future of the industry. But now it seems like EA is going to be on the back foot there because they're listening to their existing customers. And that you see this time and time again with industries where the incumbents don't disrupt themselves because they're focused on, rather than the niche audience, they're focused on kind of their core customer. And you have smaller companies that are more nimble and able to take risks that come in and sort of eat their lunch over time. And you can almost predict it today. Like that's what's going to happen here. It might not take 6 months. It might take 6 years, but you are going to see this kind of attitude be very detrimental long term, I think, for EA, and they will eventually have to go make an acquisition or do something to catch up. You just have to look at free to play mobile. I mean, we saw this exact story play out a decade ago, where every console company and gaming company kind of poo-pooed free to play mobile and said, well, that's just Candy Crush and Flappy Birds, and nobody cares about that. And our customers want a experience that they go pay $60, and it's a great experience built by, with great graphics, blah, blah, blah.
I agree, he didn't poo-poo it. Parallel. He didn't poo-poo it.
Well, at first he didn't.
Yeah. But take me behind the scenes at EA, right? What went down in the last 3 months? Because he comes on a conference call, on an earnings call, right? Shareholders, analysts, right? This is the big show for CEOs of public companies. And he says, this is the future of our industry. Big statement, right? 3 months later, he's going, well, we're not really focused on it.
I think it's as simple as look at what happened. I mean, look at exactly what happened.
Take me behind the scenes. Did he change his mind because of something he saw? Is it from internally, you think, management at EA telling him, hey, these things can't be done, or maybe we shouldn't do it? Is it analysts that, shareholders that punished him for that statement? Like, give me some of the tinfoil hat theories on why a CEO of such a big gaming company would change course. So, like, this is a 180-degree change without any explanation. To be clear, he didn't say, hey, he didn't even acknowledge that 3 months ago that he was saying this is the future of our industry. Like, if he had come out and said, hey guys, I know I said 3 months ago that NFTs were the future of our industry. We've looked at it. We've talked to a lot of our players. They don't want it. We're going to delay it. We're still thinking about it, but it's, on the roadmap for 2025 because, we're just not there yet. I would have been okay with that.
That would be a cleaner statement. I guess you have to remember, these are questions that are asked, off the cuff by analysts. So granted, that's a big topic. So you would think he would have his mind pretty made up on that. It's not like he just made that up on the spot, but these aren't prepared remarks. So you're not always getting the cleanest possible explanation. It's, he's on a conference call with hundreds of people listening, and some analyst is asking him a question. He could ask him, hey, Andrew, what's your favorite color? You know what I mean? Or he could ask him this. So it's like there is some variability to these things in terms of he's not exactly prepared for that exact question. And I would say he caveated a little bit. Like I think he did say, when you can pull it back up, like he's bullish on collectability. He's just not entirely sure that it has to be on the blockchain and NFT. I actually don't think that's a crazy statement, right? If he had articulated a little better, like I think if you ask Strauss Zelnick, if you ask Bobby Kotick, and maybe I'm just listing people who are the old dinosaurs in the industry, and if I were a Web3 Super Bowl, I'd be like, well, obviously those people are going to answer that. But I think a lot of them would probably agree with that in the sense of it's not it is not a requisite that we use the blockchain to achieve the things that Web3 gaming is trying to achieve in terms of player ownership and all that.
Yeah, I'm searching in my mind for. I guess maybe the question I asked is the wrong one, and it should be more about what was the impetus for the first statement, right? Why make such a if you're going to make a statement like that and you're going to say and Elon, interesting sort of side story, right? Elon Musk on the Tesla earning call, I don't know if you listened to it, basically in some ways shot himself in the foot. They had a great quarter, but he spent the whole call talking about how autonomous and AI robots are the future of their business, basically. and it's like, if you're going to make such a big statement, right, that in some ways says my current business is a little bit outdated, because that's the implication, right? There must be some reason behind that, because you're planning on moving into that space because I don't know, right? You want to seem like a leader. You want to, you don't want to be seen as a follower, whatever the reasoning is.
So are you tinfoil hatting saying like you think EA had a planned blockchain gaming initiative, something they were going to announce, and then have subsequently pulled it back?
Yeah, right. Like part of me wants to believe that they made a big statement because they were ready to announce something, right? Then they looked at the Ubisoft stuff that did not get a good reaction at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, whatever they were going to announce was going to be overshadowed by the Activision Blizzard, right, acquisition. So I didn't listen to that earnings call, but I guarantee the analysts are thinking about that, not about whatever EA was going to announce. And so they have to backpedal a little bit, and maybe they've changed their minds. But I always struggle when you make such a big statement and then there was nothing there to actually back it up. Nothing to.
I guess the bigger question in my mind: do you think he's right? Like, is this a smart move by EA listening to their customers? Or is this Blockbuster saying, hey, nobody wants streaming. They want to, people want to come to the store on Friday night like they always have.
I think I've used this analogy even on this podcast before. It's like the Steve Jobs approach, or maybe I've talked about it on the Business of Esports, where, part of the greatness that people ascribe to Steve Jobs is he didn't listen to what the customer wanted. He gave them what he believed was the best product or the right product, right? And it was like the classic, I think it's like a Henry Ford line or whatever. Like if you had asked people in the 1800s, they would have asked for a faster horse, not for a motorized, like a combustion engine based car. And so I think if EA had like amazing visionary leadership, I would say this, they should be thinking about how to play there. My view, though, is that EA has always been kind of a follower, right? Like they were never the biggest, they were never the best. I feel like the world of NFTs and blockchain-based gaming for EA would be a landmine, and if anyone would get it wrong, it's probably them, right? They have this history of just awful decisions around microtransactions, and fundamentally, NFTs aren't vastly different. And so, I just don't think EA's set up to succeed in that realm. Maybe they buy another business, right? Get bigger, buy a high flying, blockchain based game developer right now or something like that, and build a strategy around that. But I think as it stands, I don't think EA should be playing there. And I think this sort of backing off is probably the right thing for them to do. And you said it, as a big company that's playing defense, but a lot of big companies are just not set up to play offense, right? Like encouraging them to play offense when they're going to lose, also not a winning strategy. So let's move on, Jeff. Let's talk about this I think is more of a quick story, but it's Meta also had their earnings call. Meta, aka previously known as Facebook. And I'll just pick out the one thing I thought was interesting here, which is Q4 was the first quarter in which Meta released revenue numbers for their Reality Labs segment. They had losses of 3.3 billion in that Reality Labs segment, and Zuckerberg previously announced that the company spent 10 billion on its metaverse effort in 2021. As a, if you were a shareholder of Meta, I don't know if you actually are.
I actually am. It's very small.
But what do you make of, if anything, of the losses? They had an earnings miss, but it was because of Apple's privacy changes. Like, it wasn't related to the metaverse stuff at all.
Yeah.
Just for clarity's sake. But what do you like? Is the conclusion that they're not investing fast enough, innovating fast enough, not launching products fast enough? Like, what is your conclusion from this?
No, I mean, they're certainly putting their money where their mouth is in terms of the spend. I mean, the fact that they're spending 10 billion kind of on this Reality Labs kind of metaverse piece is a staggering number. Obviously, the stock is getting beat up tonight, and like you said, I don't think they've telegraphed all the metaverse stuff. So I think it's much more about user growth slowing, the competition with TikTok, IDFA, stuff like that, stuff that really has nothing to do with this podcast and we aren't the experts in. But in terms of them spend, I mean, $10 billion is so much on to spend on the metaverse efforts. Problem is, if you're a shareholder, they're spending all that and you really have to buy into Zuckerberg's vision of all this. And it's a big near-term drag on earnings. And when that was all well and good when the core business was chugging along and just doing really well. Now, when you start to see issues with the core business, it gets a lot hard. And actually, it's a very similar argument to what we had with Netflix, where we had a lot of talks about Netflix getting into gaming, and then they sort of last quarter had a slowing subscriber growth, and kind of for the first time, it looked like the core business is really now challenged. The question becomes: is it now? Are they more likely to get into gaming, make that big move? And with Facebook, it's the same thing. Like, does this in any way change their commitment to spending tens of billions of dollars a year to get to this metaverse vision, which again is probably 5 to 10 years out of really being an earnings driver for them? Given it's Zuckerberg and he has so much control of the company, he's been such a visionary, I doubt things change. But if you're a shareholder, you do have to start to question, like, if the core is deteriorating, how much are you willing to put up with in kind of these other bets business?
How much do you think they are willing to put up with? Because I'm going to make the case that they should put up with a lot. And here's my simple case for it. Microsoft just paid how much for Activision Blizzard?
$70 billion.
70 billion. And all the messaging is this is our metaverse play, right? This is Microsoft's metaverse play. Now, we know that's probably not really true, but that's what they're all coming out and saying, right? And if we're talking about what should shareholders put up with, what should analysts sort of accept or believe, if you believe that 70 billion is the right amount for Microsoft to spend on a metaverse play, why is it crazy for Meta / Facebook to sink 10 billion a year for the next 5 to 10 years? We're talking about basically the same amount of investment. And I would probably argue that unless Facebook / Meta really mess this up, if they sink 10 billion a year into Reality Labs, in 5 or 10 years from now, there should be a very tangible and exciting product stack there that could be quite game changing, right? Like, this is not a trivial amount of money, but they know how to do development in general, right? They know how to build good product. It's not like they don't. And they're building it without limitations.
I certainly don't disagree. It's just, when the average investor probably holds a stock less than 6 months, it becomes very hard to even think a year or two out, let alone you're talking about underwriting stuff that's 5 or 6 years out. It's just hard. It's hard to do, but I do agree. I think for people who are long-term investors, you probably end up being rewarded.
I have one last quick story here, Jeff, before we wrap up this week's podcast. And this one, I want to tie the knot nicely with our first story, also a real estate story. And here the headline is: Metaverse mortgages are being issued to buy virtual land, and one of the first ever was just signed for a property in Decentraland. So First story about Sandbox. Now we've got a Decentraland story here. It's a company called Terra Zero Technologies. They facilitated one of the first ever metaverse mortgages. Says some experts, this is the article, this is not me. The article here says some experts remain skeptical about metaverse real estate, likening it more to a crypto asset than physical property.
Did they listen to the podcast that we're currently recording? How did they?
Well, no, it's fascinating, right? Because it's such a. We maybe should have done this right after the first story, but like, it's one of these situations where, again, a mortgage sounds good, right? You want to go buy that plot next to Snoop Dogg for $450,000, but I don't have $450,000, so let me go get a mortgage. Does this all fall apart? Because
I'm just waiting for the entire economy to get blown up because subprime mortgages in the metaverse. That's going to be fun. But I mean, there's a lot.
Don't
of
give away
ways
all our best ideas here, Jeff.
there's a lot of different ways we could take this story. Given we're short on time, I'll say the interesting thing for me is just to see how so many businesses that happen in the real world are now moving into the metaverse. You know, mortgages. We're going to have insurance. We're going to have, you know, daycare in the metaverse potentially. Like, all of these things maybe sound absurd when you say them, but a lot of these industries are going to move into the virtual world. You're already kind of seeing it with banks. I mean, guilds, right? We talked about this last episode. These guilds really are just banks. They're lending you assets, and you pay them back, and you pay a return. They get a return. So you're going to see all sorts of different industries move to the metaverse, and there's going to be massive companies that are built on the back of that. And that's something that I'm pretty interested in and kind of being involved in that ecosystem.
I love ending on that thought, Jeff. For our listeners, guys, make sure you subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, send it to people. Really helps grow the show. If you have feedback, feel free, reach out to me, to Jeff. You can find us basically on every platform, or go follow the juice at Jeff Cohen 23. And really love to hear from you guys. So make sure to reach out to us. Let us know how you're liking the show. And as always, guys, we will see you next week.
Thanks for joining us here on Meta Business. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast everywhere you get your podcasts, leave a 5-star review, and tell your friends, family, and colleagues all about us. Also, make sure to follow Meta TV on all socials to get more of the best metaverse content anywhere. Tune in every week for another episode of Meta Business.